Good morning and welcome to today's webinar in the Knowledge Mile series, the 695th Lord Mayor's Lectures. Today we have a great lecture in store: global warming, energy costs and water poverty, the need for green plumbing in the UK and worldwide. In this free online lecture series, we address the connections in and around the Square Mile, the world's coffee house, and how these might help us tackle future global challenges. I'm David Adams. I am the master of the Worshipful Company of Plumbers, and I'll be convening this session today and moderating the question and answer portion at the end. Before we begin, some housekeeping from me. My job is to get out of the way as soon as possible, but the agenda is very straightforward. The introduction, then we'll have the keynote presentation by Kevin Wellman, and then from about 11:25, a question and answer session up until the end of the webinar at 11:45. Just a reminder that the whole lecture series is recorded and the recordings will be available in a couple of days' time. I am very pleased to introduce our speaker, Mr. Kevin Wellman. He is the CEO of the CIPHE, the Chartered Institute of Plumbing and Heating Engineering, and a liveryman of the Plumbers Company, and a court assistant. Kevin is a leading voice in the UK and indeed globally on the low temperature, low carbon, green plumbing revolution required today to reduce energy consumption and help impact global warming. Kevin understands the many pieces of the jigsaw puzzle better than almost anyone, and we look forward to his analysis. There are some tough messages, but there are solutions too. If the key stakeholders, from government to employers, to curricular designers, to colleges, cooperate to create coherent, steady plans, both strategic and operational, that are then properly executed. The CIPHE and the WCP are, as ever, working closely together on this future-facing agenda for plumbing in a challenging yet exciting time where innovation, sharing and resolution are key words to guide us. So that's the end of the introduction, and I'm going to hand over to Kevin Wellman now to begin today's lecture. And remember, you can put your questions into the question section on your screens. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you very much for that, David. I'd like to say a big thank you to you all for finding the time to join us this morning to find out a little bit more about the wonderful world of plumbing, or, as the Worshipful Company of Plumbers says, the mystery of plumbing. There really are some global plumbing issues which are affecting us all, certainly as far as the UK and the world is concerned. And I'd just like to spend a few moments today giving you a brief insight into some of those issues, but also, more importantly, the solutions, as David quite rightly referred to as well. If I start by just referring to the United Nations, and during their most recent UN World Water Report, they've actually referred again to the fact that the water use is increasing year on year. It goes up at about 1% per year and has done over the last 40 years. And there's no evidence to show that it is going to reduce in the next few years as well. So it will grow at that same sort of pace over certainly up until 2050. There are other issues. We all know about the world's population, but 26% of the world's population don't have access to safely managed drinking water. We see that on lots of reports on the news programs. The world's population is increasing. It reached 8 billion in November 22. On average, the population increases about 1 billion every 10, 11, 12 years. So again, it is another problem that we are facing day to day. When we come back to looking at the water supply, and we know that water is a finite resource, there are over 300 trillion gallons of water on the planet, which sounds magnificent, but only 3% of that is fresh water, and 2% of that is frozen. So therefore, we only have 1% of drinking water to cover the growing population. Certainly with regards to the consumption of water, the majority of that is used for agriculture, and so less than 10% is really used for domestic consumption. So the key issue here is the population is growing year on year, but the drinking water that we have available is certainly fixed, hence the reference to a finite resource. As far as usage is concerned, the UK tends to work on a consumption daily per person of 150 litres. Other countries do allocate more than that. And with the likes of Australia, just to clarify with the figures there, that really does vary from state to state. But yeah, certainly between 150 and 500 litres is not uncommon in some parts of the world. The one issue I should also point out is that whilst we talk about water shortages in the UK, and I'll cover that in a bit more detail as well, in Cape Town, South Africa, they very nearly ran out of water a few years ago. It was all called at the time Day Zero, and they'd had the worst supply of water or amount of water available for some 400 years. So what they then did through the government, they embarked on a massive communication program, but they also then built aquifers and started to encourage green infrastructure investment. So whilst the water shortage was particularly bad there, and as I've mentioned, they were in fear of running out of water, so at least something positive was done about it, but it took collective effort on behalf of the government and everybody else. You may well have seen in some of the overseas countries, women and children carrying water on their head. And just to put that into perspective, then 20 litres of water weighs 20 kilograms or thereabouts. So again, these are big issues that are taking place in order for people to get access to the safest possible water. Now, from time to time, there are human disasters and areas of conflict, and this is why the Sphere project was created in 1997 through the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, and they really get involved when there are countries in need of support through such disasters and conflicts. And by way of the water recommended that they talk about is coming in at 15 litres per day should be the minimum provision of clean water for everybody. So clearly it's a different situation when there are the conflict and disaster areas, but nevertheless they are doing as much as they can to promote water, sanitation and hygiene, and certainly health related issues as far as that goes. But when water is scarce, then we do often see many health related disasters accompanying that. In coming back to the UK, then there are lots of discussions underway at the moment with regards to water savings and how best we can do that. There are major concerns about the UK population, again increasing, and the same issues with water scarcity. And there's been discussions to see if in changing regulations we can actually achieve a minimum level of 105 litres per person per day, certainly by 2025, and maybe in some areas which are under significant water stress to reduce that down to 90. Now, these are all goals and targets, and there are lots of discussions going on, and I'll refer to government's involvement a number of times throughout this presentation. But there is lots of debate at the moment to say, well, is it achievable by 2035 for us to actually get to a stage where we can be recommending 90 litres per person per day and 80 litres in water-stressed areas? That brings its own difficulties because people believe that, or many people believe that water should be more freely available. They shouldn't be rationed, and why should people in water-stressed areas pay more money out than people in areas where there is plenty of water supply available? So again, this needs to be handled very carefully with some very clear messaging from all concerned, whether that be the water industry and government departments as well. As part of the water challenges, then there was a flowing forward report that I helped out with in 2023, and there are a few things just to pick out of that. Is one is that if action is not taken to reduce our own water consumption in England, then we'll need an extra 3.5 billion litres of water per day by 2050. Now, that was coming out of that report that was done, as I mentioned, 18 months ago or so. According to DEFRA, they're putting that figure now at 4 billion litres of water per day, and it could even be greater than that. So it is a major concern for all of us. And with climate change, if we do, or when, I guess we should say, when we have an extreme drought, that could cause water shortfall of somewhere in the region of 2 billion litres litres of water per day. So again, these are severe water stressed issues which do cause problems for us all. Now, one of the other things here is DEFRA is very much concerned about leaky loos. And you might say, well, why? What's the problem there? Because a leaky loo can't be too much of an issue. But when we look at the amount of water that is wasted for each leaking toilet, where the water literally goes down the back of the WC pan because of what would be the flap valve or some sort of device within the water system leaking and passing water, then it can discharge between 200 and 400 litres of water per day. That actually amounts to somewhere in the region of 400 litres of water a day across the UK. So again, that is causing significant concern, and DEFRA are in discussions with industry to see what we can do collectively to try to help to resolve all of this. Elsewhere, I do have lots of discussions with the insurance sector, and they are concerned because they are paying out in the region of £2 million each day for escape of water claims. Now, they are separate to the leaky loo problems. These would be pipes and fittings failure. I should add that these are very rarely product failures. These are down to poor workmanship and just bad installations. So where it could well be that it's unqualified installers or people dabbling with plumbing, and then they have to face the consequences of major flood damage afterwards. I think it's also fair to say that government is very much involved in this whole situation. Perhaps not too much on the insurance side, because that's a separate set of discussions that I am having, but certainly with the water conservation, government is looking at the relevant regulatory action it needs to take. As part of that, the solutions are certainly along the lines of building regulation changes. That will happen. And clearly that will need to be supported by manufacturers and installers. There needs to be a good information exchange, communication exchange program as part of that. But again, following my discussions with manufacturers, I know they are wanting to do as much as they can in support of government aspirations here. There's also the need to change people's behaviours. We are seeing more and more water meters installed, but the water sector and government are promoting the concept of smart water meters, which again should be able to better monitor if there is too much water leakage or water usage in particular dwellings. We do risk the problems again as we come to the summer months. Despite all the rain that we've had, that there could well be hosepipe bans again in some parts of the country. And again, it's all part of the difficulties in not having enough water storage available during peak demand. Elsewhere, another regulatory change which DEFRA are looking at imposing is in 2025, they want to introduce a mandatory water labelling scheme. And that's really there to look at water efficient products to encourage greater water efficiency. There is a voluntary water label scheme at the moment, and that's called the Unified Water Label. That has been very successful, I would say, in the sense that it's my understanding that some 70% of manufacturers actually support the Unified Water Label. The difficulty that we have is that, again, from my own personal point of view, whilst the voluntary scheme is working well and government is intent on having a mandatory scheme, discussions have to take place whether it will be possible to just have one single scheme in the future. If not, I do fear that we could have confused messaging if there are two water label schemes, and that confusion will be amongst the public and maybe the industry as well with installers. So I do hope that something positive can be done about that in the coming months before 2025. There are also lots more encouragement of water-saving devices. We've seen some great inroads in recent years with the spray taps, waterless urinals, and you might well see signs up in public places to say through a waterless urinal, it's saving 100,000 litres of water a year and so on. I personally think we should have a lot more promotion of water savings along those sort of lines. There's also rainwater harvesting, which is on the increase. But again, a big difficulty there is that we then need to make sure that we have adequately skilled people to install, but more importantly, to maintain such devices on an ongoing basis. So the education and training of apprenticeships or apprentices and the ongoing continuing professional development, or CPD, for the industry is vital. I think we need to do a lot more of that, both with regards to water efficiency, water regulations, but also as we talk then about net zero and things like that. Because on the subject of net zero, the government set a target some couple of years ago that the UK needs to install 600,000 heat pumps a year by 2028. Now, this table here or chart just shows where the UK currently sits amongst all our friends in Europe with the amount of heat pumps which are installed at present. So there is a fair way to go. Putting that into numbers, then you will see different numbers quoted through different media on the website, but the figures I'm working to are that in 2021 the UK installed about 43,000 heat pumps, and that increased to 60,000 in 2022. Other reports were somewhat more negative and show far fewer installations. But when we then start to look at the amount of installers, then 3 years ago we had 3,000 trained engineers for heat pumps, and that rose to 8,000 by 2023 according to the Heat Pump Association. Now, even that is nowhere near enough, and whilst the CIPHE have trained somewhere in the region of 1,000 installers on low temperature design, then we still need many more qualified engineers in the years ahead. Certainly over the next 4 years, we need at least 27, perhaps even 30,000 heat pump installers. So again, there's a lot more to be done there. When we then just make the other comparison with Europe, then they are set to, by 2030, to achieve 45 million heat pump installations in the residential sector. Now, when we then analyze that to say, well, why is that the case? Well, they've been promoting it a lot more readily certainly in recent years, but also they have a different attitude towards the housing stock with regards to insulation, and there have been greater financial incentives, although in the UK that the government is looking to see how it can incentivize industry to really make and have installed many more heat pumps. And one thing that they have introduced, and although it's been delayed for 12 months, is a clean heat market mechanism, which some people have called it a boiler tax, but in effect it means that for boiler manufacturers who are manufacturing gas boilers and heat pumps, that they will actually be fined if they don't install their correct quota or if they don't manufacture sufficient numbers of heat pumps. Now, if a company sells 100 gas boilers, then they need to sell 4% or 4 heat pumps. And if they only sell 2, they'll be penalised £3,000 for each one of those because of the 2 heat pumps short of that 100 target. Now, in reality, in the last 12 months, somewhere in the region of 1.7 million gas boilers have been sold. So the potential fines are phenomenal. But also linked to that is that this is a scaled penalty as such, or imposition. And although it's 4% at the moment, then in a further year's time, that is likely to increase to 6% of sales. So the government is really pushing manufacturers to be involved with this solution. The difficulty again is when we look at the amount of the 1.7 million gas boilers that are currently being sold, then maybe 80% of those are distressed purchases. So if you then say to the householders, well, I can install a heat pump for you, but it might take X amount of days or weeks to put in, but with a gas boiler, I can get that tomorrow for you. Then that's part of the pressures that everybody has. So again, this is a situation that time will tell how this fizzles out, but it's all part of government's desire to promote this rapidly. They're also providing incentives for consumers under the boiler upgrade scheme, which allows grants of £7,500, and certainly for air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. And there's also similar support, or the 5,000 for installation of biomass boilers. Again, the government introduced a consultation last year about improving boiler standards, and coming out of that, they are now advocating that all gas-safe installers attend low temperature training courses. So linking this to mandated training is a key change for the government, which is really good to see. The skills shortage in the UK as well, then sadly there's been a 25% reduction in plumbing apprentices over the last 12 months. And whereas in previous years we used to have maybe 3,000 people studying qualifying at level 2, and 1,000 of those would proceed on to level 3 qualification. In the last 2 years, only just over 200 candidates have actually passed the current apprenticeship standard. So we've been calling for a review of that, and government have asked IFATE have asked the CIPHE to help address the situation by doing research amongst the industry, and then to give the feedback to government in a number of different departments. The other links, or the actual implications of these problems of a lack of skills, and is certainly people who, according to NHS Digital, end up in hospital as a result of tap water or hot tap water scalds. That has increased in the last 12 months by 22%, and those being burnt through hot heating appliances, pipes and radiators, again, that's increased as well. So putting that into numbers, in the last 10 years, up until 2023, over 32,000 bed days were taken up by people being admitted to hospital with hot tap water burns, scalds, and just over 31,000 bed days for those who have been admitted to hospital because of heating appliances, radiators and pipes, and so on. Again, that's in addition to those who would go to accident and emergency and be discharged within the time that they were being treated during that day. So skills issues do manifest itself with people, particularly the vulnerable, being exposed to water-related problems. So the solutions, again, as far as CIPHE is concerned, is that we do want to promote license to practice. We want to encourage fit-for-purpose apprenticeships, and we are developing the training course, the new apprenticeship, as I alluded to a moment ago. So that will cover level 2 and 3, and we hope that that can be launched certainly September next year. And again, mandatory CPD is something which we are calling upon as much as possible. Now, the Worcester Company Plumbers have been actively involved with all these issues over many years, and on the 21st of July 1886, it was responsible for creating the Register of Plumbers, which is the longest serving register of competency that the UK has ever had. They also earlier this year launched the Plumbing Professionals Development Scheme, in which we are really looking at emerging talent within the industry to support them throughout their career development, and that could be over a 10-year period. There's also been other presentations with help with the water conservators, who we also have a very good rapport with. So again, joint workshops are a key to the future with all water-related issues. We also provide bursary awards, and this year we've seen 6 winners presented with £1,000 worth of tool vouchers to help them with their tool kits as they grow their careers as well. And sponsoring Learner of the Year, female skills competitions, and supporting charities overseas is also a key part of the Worcester Company of Plumbers activities. Now, as we look at global challenges, then unsafe sanitation is responsible for many thousands of deaths. 775,000. And we're still concerned that billions of people, nearly 2.5 billion, don't have access to improved sanitation. 60% of the world don't have access to safely managed sanitation. There are still lead in water issues, and there's global skills shortages. So the issues I've talked about as far as the UK is concerned is the same in many parts of the world. Now, one of my other activities is that I'm deputy chair of the World Plumbing Council, and they recently signed up to the United Nations Lead-Free Water Pledge, which is designed to ensure that drinking water is lead-free by 2040. There are still incidents taking place throughout the world, and that is something that we are trying to cease as soon as we can. We also have NGO status, non-governmental organization status with the World Health Organization, and are involved with projects to do with healthcare in places like Manila, and we provide educational programs in Rwanda. The other key thing is, in order for people to learn what's going on elsewhere in the world, there are scholarships available, and the WPC provides 3 education and training scholarships, which are a sizable amount of money to help people have greater awareness of education in other developed countries. Another key thing is that we are updating the World Health Organization's health aspects of plumbing publication, which hopefully will have that available in the next year or so. Now, as part of solutions, the world does talk about plumbing related issues, and I'm delighted to be able to confirm that in June 2026, the UK will be hosting the 14th World Plumbing Conference. The main themes are dealing with skills, sustainability, and supply and conservation. So again, these are the issues which I've talked about today, but these are very much fundamental problems globally. And when the UK secured the bid for the World Plumbing Conference, it was on the basis that the other countries are saying we have the same problems and we want to get together to be able to deal with these and come out with some sort of legacy from a conference so that we can actually make change for the better. Now, this conference, I am forecasting in the region of 2,000 delegates, 700 exhibitors, 20,000 visitors. So it will indeed be the largest plumbing and heating conference that the UK has ever seen. And I would say watch this space. If you are wanting more information on that, then please visit the CIPHE's website. But in any event, for all of these water-related issues, if you do require further information, please do come back to David or myself. In concluding, I'd just like to, again, thank you very much for your time today and say that I'm open to any questions.
Thank you very much, Kevin Wellman, for a rapid tour through the challenges globally and in the UK of water usage, training and development. I think a key theme emerging from that is the need for cooperation and coherence in planning, and certainly I think there's an expectation that that can happen. And we ended on a good note, knowing that there's going to be a significant conference in the UK, although that's not till 2026. But without further ado, I'd like to move to some questions, Kevin. If we could take them fairly quickly, because we've got several to consider. We've got about 15 or 16 minutes left. Kevin, the first question we have is a one that you perhaps can help us with, but there's been some queries as to whether in countries like the USA and Australia, this came from Tessa Kershaw, whether more water per person is used simply because in those countries there's much more use of water for watering lawns and filling swimming pools. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, that certainly is the case. However, both countries do have their own concerns about the amount of water that is being consumed. And again, the same applies with the amount of water used in farms and irrigation and such things there. So the broader area people have, that the more water is consumed in that way for farming and agricultural purposes. But it is also fair to say that both countries in question, and indeed others like Singapore, Hong Kong, they also have water labelling schemes, and most of those are mandatory. So again, it just reaffirms the concerns that all countries have about the need to conserve water.
It leads to the second question, Kevin, which is, this came from Gabby Glazner Cipolloni. Does this water usage data you've been presenting, is it simply private household use, like the per person data, or does that include industrial usage in the averaging?
Yeah, that is the residential data. So all the other industrial, commercial, and agricultural data figures, that's all in addition to that. And that's where it's a good point, because some of the stats on the website do show combined usage in some of the countries. So you have to be able to whittle out which is domestic data.
Well, it caused a question from Clive Bullen, Kevin, which was around this industrial use. Are the problems of water shortages not due to industries like fashion and meat and agriculture, rather than consumption by individuals? Do the industrial numbers actually completely dwarf the domestic usage numbers in reality?
In some ways they do, and if I just give one example, that I mentioned that a leaky loo in a residential home can waste 200 to 400 litres of water per day. There have been cases which the water companies have found in manufacturers' accommodation or premises, when a leaky loo has been happening. It's gone unnoticed for a long time, and they've actually measured that as wasting 8,000 to 9,000 litres of water a day. So again, some of the issues are even greater, but I know that's focusing on leaky loos. There are other things as well as part of the question, but government is talking to everybody, the manufacturers as well, to see how water can be reduced, or the consumption across the board.
But are they setting rules for and regulations for industrial consumption so that industries reduce their water consumption? We haven't talked about industrial legislation today.
No, and certainly I'm not privy to those discussions at the moment. All of my focus has been on the domestic residential side, but certainly with regards to the fittings that are used, then they will be the same for everybody. And government is focusing on water fittings particularly, and that would be for all applications.
Okay, thank you. We have a question from Heriberto Bustamante, who's asking something quite specific about the recycling of water, particularly final effluents, he calls them, after oxidation processes, from tertiary wastewater treatment plants. Is that being considered in the UK? That's a very technical question. Do you have any response to that?
Yeah, I think that it's fair to say that water companies are considering everything. So in addition to that, they're looking again at more reservoirs to store the water. They're considering water treatment facilities. It's everything is being considered, because the water industry knows that something seriously has to be done about this whole thing. So it is causing immense concern everywhere. We know that some countries have other forms of water treatment that we don't yet have due to the cost implications. But again, it's a situation that even with regards to rainwater harvesting, that is somewhat more simplistic in many respects, but even that can go wrong. And so the key issue with this is to ensure that if you have the installation done properly in the first instance, then you need ongoing maintenance of a sufficiently high nature. And that's the same for any type of application.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, changing direction, but really at the heart of some of what you said about training and development, and how essential that is, whether it's continuing professional development or apprenticeships. And we're thinking perhaps particularly of the UK on this question. What is the reason for the huge reduction in the number of apprenticeships in that last 2-year period? I know there's a big answer to this, but I guess there's a short answer as well. Is that to do with the design of the apprenticeship model that was changed? What's the cause of that?
Yeah, so the design was changed, and it went from a situation where we used to have a level 2 and a level 3 qualification, or yesteryear it would be a Sitting Guilds craft or advanced craft qualification. So somebody could do maybe 2 years training and then have a break before going on to their next course of level 3. With the Plumbing Trailblazer, that was designed to be a 4-year training course with no opportunity to stop halfway through or to be qualified halfway through the course. What then happened is that a review of the standard took place a year ago, and within that review, the actual end test is called an endpoint assessment. That was
Yeah.
made even harder. So it meant that those who were studying for the course would needed to undertake somewhere in the region of 7 days of examination. And so there's been, dare I say, a double whammy in the sense that fewer people have gone into the apprenticeship to start with, hence the 25% decline that I'd mentioned earlier. This is why the DFE spoke to IFATE and said the industry needs to do something about it, because in addition to that, fewer people were completing the course because it was too difficult. Then, as part of those problems, a number of colleges decided to walk away from the training as well, and they said that they were going to stop the training course because it's so expensive, and the funding for 4 years funding, you get £22,000. For gas training, which is 18 months, the funding was £23,000. So there's a number of related problems here, but the key thing that industry has been calling for is to bring back a level 2 qualification and to focus on some of these areas which I've talked about with regards to water efficiency, rainwater harvesting. As far as I'm concerned, we need to go back to basics to deliver the key fundamentals of a plumbing occupation.
And to be absolutely clear, Kevin, you have been asked by various government bodies to revisit the status of level 2 and potentially to reintroduce it.
I think it's fair to say, and this is the one thing that I've been pleasantly surprised about, because it's so easy to blame government for everything, and it's always somebody else's fault. But in this instance, where we've been calling upon government for 30 years or more to have joined up thinking, then other departments I'm speaking to are saying we want changes to the apprenticeship standards. So by naming names, that's certainly the DEFRA. I've spoken to the new building safety regulator through the Health and Safety Executive. They are introducing what is called MTCs. Now, I know there's enough acronyms around, but that is mandatory technical competencies. So that really underpins what should be future training provision. And what we've said to HSC is that we want to make sure that those MTCs, all aspects of those competencies, are fully covered within the level 2 and 3. Now, most of those, or a lot of that, would be at the higher level of the training, but at level 3 for those who do go on for that. But again, having the support and the general enthusiasm from governments in a number of different ways is proving really, really helpful in this whole thing.
Excellent. That last question was from Paul Nash. This question is from Matthew Leach. Could the difference in price between gas and electricity in the UK reduce so that heat pumps are cheaper to operate than gas boilers?
There have certainly been calls for greater incentives to be given for those who do have heat pumps. So again, that's a particular lobby that has been happening. And I think that the one thing to say is that we all support the idea of net zero and reducing our carbon footprint. I know that manufacturers are very keen to bring out the technology to do that as well. But again, in order to really encourage the public to get behind this, they need greater clarity, because there have been confused messages, which I'm concerned about. The CIPHE is just about to post on its website a guidance document called Home Heating that just explains the different types of technologies, not favouring any one technology over another, but clearly there are a number of ways that you can heat your home. But bringing down electricity charges could be really advantageous in the future.
Here's a question, Kevin, from Hugh Purser, which is quite cheeky. In the public perception, the biggest problem in the UK seems to be with the water companies. What would happen if these companies were being run by plumbers?
Yeah, well, I'd like to see, I'd say a great improvement in communication straight away. But clearly, having liaised with a number of water companies, I know that they are serious about this whole thing as well, and they have interacted with government and are very keen to roll out the smart metering program. Again, some opposition in places because some people don't like the idea of their homes being monitored in that way. But the idea is to just have similar meters that will actually then show you if you do have any excessive usage of water, which then could be down to a leak of some description. And the other byproduct of that, without going off at too much of a tangent, when people do have these leaks, whether it be the escape of water the insurance industry faces or other small leaks throughout the home, it can create damp and moisture. So it has other negative effects from a health and safety and welfare point of view. And so again, certainly the vulnerable, if they're in a damp environment, then there are other implications with all of this. So saving water and making water, an expression that we adopted a few years ago is to use water wisely and save water safely.
Okay, Kevin, thank you. We haven't got a great deal of time left, but I'm going to try and slip in a couple more questions for you. And thanks for your rapid answering to these. This comes from Martin Bigg, who indeed is the master of the Worshipful Company of Water Conservators. He said it was a great presentation. He's asking, what is the Plumbers Company? And I think probably we can say the Plumbers Company and the CIPHE. What are we doing to address public attitudes to valuing water more and therefore adopting the new technology? Is there sort of an education process that needs to put a greater value on water, almost a price on water, that would help us all take it more seriously as a precious resource?
Yeah, but I've actually spoken about that precise point with government and said that we do need a communications engagement program without it sounding too formalized, but the public do need information and they need clarity, because if an installer, qualified plumber, goes into somebody's home and they says you need to have this, that, the other, there's a fear that the consumer might think that they're trying to cultivate the work. So what we need is, I'd propose that we have home health checks supported by government, all sorts of different things. That if we can get people into the houses to give them guidance on their plumbing systems, then that's a good place to start. But essentially, we do need more collaboration to actually promote good plumbing and the use of good water, certainly across the UK.
So it sounds like there's quite a bit more that can be done in creating that new perception of water.
Yes, yeah, because when there's water pouring through somebody's ceiling, the plumber can be the knight in shining armor. If there's no water available because of a drought, then, or very little water available, I should say, then if there are hosepipe bans, then people start to get concerned about these issues. But clearly, it is an essential part of our livelihood, and the fact that all the water the majority of water that is treated now then is used in the homes, or all that water which is, and lots of it goes literally down the back of the pan or for flushing, then we do need to have a rethink as to maybe a dual plumbing system certainly in the future, and maximum use of rainwater harvesting. But therein lies another communication exercise, and I know we're up against it with time, but when it comes to communications, even the basic issues such as siphons and the toilets, the dual flush toilet systems, people can be confused as to which button to press and what's a little button for, what's a large button for. So the communications comes from every part of the plumbing system.
Well, Kevin, that's excellent. And the question I'm coming to now, probably the last one, is from James York. It's a question about entrepreneurship and innovation, really. Is there a role for private startups, for small companies to be formed for home rainwater collection? Is there scope for innovation to help people collect rainwater in a more effective way?
Yes, there certainly is, but the key thing is to make sure that is saved in a safe manner as well. So as an example, if it was in a sort of water butt which was exposed to sunlight, then you have to be careful of microbial growth, Legionnaire's disease, and so on. But I think as far as a concept goes, there would be manufacturers around that would help support and encourage these things. And I've known a few products over the years that have been discussed with manufacturers who I understand the difficulty of competition, but there is some guidance out there quite often from people who are certainly entrenched in these sort of ideas.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much. There are probably one or two questions I haven't got to, but I'm going to have to bring us to a conclusion now. But I just want to say that we are obviously very grateful to Kevin Wellman for his excellent input today in this rapid tour of the subject. I want to bring to your attention the forthcoming lectures that you can see coming up in the coming days, on the 14th of May, the 16th of May, and the 22nd of May. I also want to tell you that we have this whole program has been recorded, and so in the next several hours or days that will become available to everybody to see once again. We thank everybody for their interest and involvement today. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for signing on to the lecture, and you can see it on the YouTube channel in case you'd like to revisit any of the subject matter. We hope to see you all again soon at future lectures, and thank you, Kevin, once again for your contribution. But at that point, I would like to finish our lecture today. Thank you all very much.